better option than what I originally wanted to play for Tony, which was the Michigan Fight song, because that's what we shared.
He's sitting up here to greet me. Friends, that is both my hello to you and the heart of my thoughts about Tony. This room is filled with scores of Tony's friends, some perhaps even from his high school days. Although I'm the older sister and shouldn't have, in my supposed sophistication, been bothering with Tony's high school friends, I learned that they were a bunch of incredibly bright and equally incredibly funny guys I loved to hang around with. As a gang, we'd go to summertime Washington Senators baseball games, even doubleheaders. And anybody who knows baseball and the Washington Senators knows what a drag a doubleheader could be. But we seldom watched the games, and because of the non-stop hysterical skits the guys would improvise right up in the bleachers. From his high school years forward, Tony made friends and kept those friends. In his life's progress, he did not leave people behind, but rather he gathered new friends into his ever-growing circle of people he cared about. In fact, my daughter Jessica just reminded me what a dear Facebook friend Tony was to her. She said his loving messages always seemed to pop up just when she needed them most. But it was not always this way with friends. Because we moved around so much in our childhood, it was impossible for either of us to make lasting friends. So Tony and I relied on each other. We weren't harmonious companions all the time, far from it. We could fight and annoy each other with the best of them. Still, from those days when all we had was each other, we built on our closeness in our own signature way, television. In the 1950s, we joined millions of kids sitting cross-legged in front of their TVs to watch the premiere of the Mickey Mouse Club. Real live kids, some our age, performing and talking to one another, and starring in episodes contained right in that wondrous hour of Spin and Marty and Porky and White Shadow. Our favorite Western, The Lone Ranger, inspired us to ask for 6-shooters and holsters. We practiced quick drawing against each other for hours. The English show Robin Hood we love to watch because of Robin's heroism and the much-touted courage of King Richard the Lionheart, just as we love to hate the evil Sheriff of Nottingham. It would be many years before the writers of history books would stop glorifying the Crusades and King Richard's part in them, but for the time we loved the adventure, while we would dodge around the furniture in our living room, our Sherwood forest, crying, "Robin, oh Robin!" Later, we moved to Manhattan. We'd race home from school to watch American Bandstand, which gave us two preteen kids a glimpse into the awesome, mysterious world of teenagers. So all of these, and many more TV characters, imaginary and real, were our shared friends, guides, and role models. But once we were ensconced in our new life in Washington, D.C., we were blessed by the best possible gifts to us, Andy, and 4 years later, Molly. They were our babies, and they clinched our favorite new identities, big sister and big brother. When Andy was born, Tony was not yet a teen, but he took to big brothering easily. Baby Andy was an easy mark for Tony, and he could make Andy laugh as no one else could. We babysat all the time, and once Andy was asleep, we would scare ourselves silly watching Twilight Zone, Chiller, One Step Beyond, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I'm dating myself here. Again, TV gave us the markers for that time of our lives. After practicing on Andy, we were veteran babysitters when Molly came along. Tony, now a full teenager, took his job as big brother more seriously than ever before. While he was serious about being their protector, I can still remember anything but serious Tony sitting on the floor while little Andy and tiny Molly assaulted him from every direction. The three of them eventually melded into one squirming mass of flailing arms and legs while squealing with laughter, and Tony's laugh was the loudest of all.
Yes, I'm comfortably anxious. So as Amy was saying, my brother Tony was 14 when I was born, and and I was not yet 4 when he left for Cornell. So my very young memories are of his frequent visits home and spending many a family summer vacation on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Tony always made a great deal of effort to be present in my life, no matter where he was geographically. He wrote to me and insisted that I keep connected with him in the same way. Family was everything to him, both immediate and extended, and I always felt loved and treasured as his baby sister. The effort Tony has made through my entire life to be present, connected, and available is a common theme, I think, for everyone in this room. He always went out of his way to make his frequent visits happen, always putting others before himself. He spent a lot of time over the last 23 years at my home in Pennsylvania, and those are memories my family and I will always treasure. The mornings hearing him shuffle toward the coffee maker, sorting through his life extension vitamins, and always the questions from me, Tony, have you put on deodorant today? Is that what you're wearing? And he would say with his chuckling, yes, in response. He was just accepted as being Tony when he used the arm of our leather chair as his charcuterie board for his pre-dinner snacks. Yeah, salami and cheese right there on the leather chair. Think a thing of it. And always with his self-deprecating humor, he loved to give my husband fashion advice. Tony always made me feel as if I were the only person in the room. He gave his undivided attention, and he listened not to respond, but to understand. And he would often say, is that right? Or incredible. I always found his presence to be calming, and I loved just having him around. The loss of Tony is going to be felt forever. He was one of a kind, a true hero in so many ways to me. I've been speaking of him a lot lately, obviously, and I can only say glowing things. I just think he was one of the most wonderful people I know. And I know through this grief and this terrible loss of this amazing man, I'm reminded of how much I loved, and for that I am so grateful to Tony.
Tony and I were as close as brothers can be, even 3,000 miles apart. I looked up to him, and I always called him my best male friend. I was in awe of his intellect, and as we've all heard, how he could sound like an expert on everything, but without ever making you feel like he was talking down to you. He was sharing. But there was one thing I did not admire or want to emulate in my brother, and that was the way he dressed. You may remember the Yes slogan, what can Brown do for you? Tony took that way too literally. There was a period where he decided that there wasn't a shade of brown that he wouldn't try to put on. There was maybe a dark brown shirt and maybe some tan pants, and that would be about as colorful as he was getting. And we thought Corey was the colorblind member of the family. Then there were, yes, the sweatpants. Bulging pockets stuffed with keys, receipts, money. If his beloved computer could be shrunk back, so he would have put a laptop in there. I looked like a GQ model standing next to Tony. Of course, that was all part of what we all loved about him. There were far more important things for him to pay attention to. His loving wife and boys, grandkids, our wretched political climate, and countless other things to discover and explore. As we all probably have done recently, I look back through some of our endless text messages, threads between us, and it was filled with banter, mainly about sports games. I never understood his insistence on taping games and not wanting to talk about them live while we were dropping nuts. We also talked about his health and this recent weight loss and plenty of silly talk. We were also old school in how we communicated, and we had our weekly phone calls. If it was NBA playoff season, he would answer the phone saying, Warrior Sports Radio, you're on the air. Or when he sent links or clips about one of his Hollywood actress crushes like Jennifer Aniston. I would then call and impersonate the voice of a local DA about restraining orders that need to go out immediately. These are things you don't know about Tony, I'm sure. But in these sad, lonely weeks since his death, I find myself lost, particularly on Sundays, the day we usually spoke. I recently wanted to call him to work out the itinerary of this West Coast trip that was going to happen in Oregon. He would have been saying how, quote, unbelievable, unquote, it would have been without many of us together. But now we'll start calling him B, and Toby, and Corey, and Jordan, and we will keep connected so our closest will never fade and live on in the loving legacy the NMB created. I love you, bro.